Okay, so here are the 3 boxes. Okay, so if I have help, hopefully that those will be produced in a timely fashion and will be actually put in the D2L under the podcast of every week, which will be associated with that particular lecture. So the lecture will have the name, the podcast will have the same exact name, except it's going to have a podcast with it. All right, and hopefully that will help you within this condensed 7-week time to, kind of stay on top of things. Okay, let's see here. The D2L, we talked about it. If you have any questions about D2L, please let me know, because really that's going to be our main media of communication, plus the emails, and of course, if you want to call, you can always call, but try to stay on top of the D2L because this is where I'm going to report all and put all the messages. All right, let's see here. We covered this. Of course, if anybody have any problems, any disability, please let me know at any point of time so we can accommodate that. Of course, also exams should never be missed unless you have really bad excuse, whether you're sick, extremely sick and stuff like that. And make sure you communicate with me. Of course, you cannot communicate with me ahead of time if you're getting sick, because you don't know when you get sick. But try to communicate with me and any other excuses that you can work things out around. Otherwise, there will be no makeup exams. And of course, the quizzes, definitely there will be no makeup no matter what, because we have them available for 24 hours, so you can take them at any time, online, from your home, from wherever you are. So quizzes that are missed. And remember also that I'm going to take only the 10 highest quizzes. So whatever you miss is fine, you still have extra quizzes to consider. And so that you don't have to worry about. As far as the attendance is concerned, I would average that over the entire semester. So every day that you're here, I will give you that 5% point, and then I, of course, at the end of the semester, I average that and see, what's your average score. Okay. Today, I'm going to ask you to click. There will be clicker questions. However, I'm not going to count starting today because some people couldn't get their clickers in time. So hopefully, starting tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, we'll start counting the clicker points and hence the attendance. All right. Any questions? Any questions at all? Any school? Okay. So let's go ahead and start with simple reviews. And those are stuff that we all took in general chemistry. Basically, I'm going to first cover the essence of chemistry and hence eventually essence of life, the chemical bonds. All right, so let me get rid of this. Okay, so covalent bonds. We're going to talk about the covalent bonds and all the subsequent very weak bonds. Covalent bonds are the strongest bonds. Basically, if you remember from Gen Chem, is an electron that is shared between 2 atoms. Okay? And that is really the basics of life. Every chemical, every amino acid, every carbohydrate we talk about, it's constructed by having those covalent bonds between these different atoms. It's a very strong bond, and it's about roughly, let's see here, it's about between 2.4 times 10 to the second to 2.4 times 2.4. Or 240 kilocalorie per mole. So it's very strong. You can see here electrons are shared between 2 atoms. Now, the covalent bond can be slightly polar or can be non-polar, depending on which atom is bigger than which. If you have 2 different sized atoms that are sharing electrons, there will be partial polarity. There will be partial charge on either atom, and that's because the bigger one is basically having the electrons shared with the other one more. So it would have the electron shared with this, for example, spending more time here than here. So this would be partially negative charge, and this would be partially positively charged. Now, those are all roughly the molecules we're going to cover. These are the bases of biochemistry, life in general. We have our 20 amino acids, we have our carbohydrates, we have our nitrogenous bases, and the ATP and nucleotides that produce ATP. Those are all made from covalent bonds. Those bonds are very hard to break. They need enzymes to break, but basically this is the building blocks of life. Now, on top of that come extremely important weak bonds. So the covalent bonds are the strongest bonds. Okay? Everything I'm going to talk about are considered weak bonds. And believe it or not, those weak bonds really is what govern life in general. Without those weak bonds, life is not possible. Okay? The first one is the hydrogen bond. Hydrogen bond is basically, from the name, is a hydrogen atom shared between two molecules. One molecule has that hydrogen atom covalently linked to it. For example, let's take the first scenario here. Nitrogen is covalently linked to hydrogen. Okay? And because nitrogen is much bigger than hydrogen, so this is partially negative and the hydrogen is partially positive. Now, on the other side here, there is a totally different molecule, another molecule altogether, that has a nitrogen as well, or could have an oxygen. But that nitrogen is also partially charged from whatever covalent bond this other atom has. Now, because of this, it will tend to pull slightly on that hydrogen from the other atom. And that pulling between the two molecules is never going to acquire this hydrogen, but it's just going to pull enough to have slight bonding. And that is called the hydrogen bond. It's very weak. But the strength of those weak bonds is in numbers. You have thousands of those in the molecule. Okay? So this is hydrogen bond because the hydrogen is shared between two molecules. Not 100% shared, not like the electrons in the covalent bond, but it's shared because there is a little slight attraction. And that attraction is because of this polar bond. Okay? So it's a hydrogen that's shared between nitrogen and oxygen, or nitrogen and nitrogen, or oxygen and nitrogen. Those are usually the three atoms involved in this. Okay? It's obviously many orders of magnitude weaker than your average covalent bond. Next one, which is even weaker, it's the ionic bond. And that's simply between two differently charged atoms. One is charged positive and one is charged negative. Positive and negative come together. And you can see that, for example, in the hydration shell in water. When you have ions there, you have the magnesium and you have calcium and chloride, and so those will just tend to bind together. Otherwise, the water itself will have a shell around it and separate it from each other. So this is a very weak bond. Extremely important as well. The strength of this bond is in numbers, just like the hydrogen bond. And we will see many examples, by the way, during the semester. You can see here, still. Now, van der Waals interactions, there are several of them, but the one that I'm talking about here is basically fluctuation in the electron distribution around the nucleus. It's extremely cool, extremely weak, but very, very, very effective and very important. If you look at this here, you have two atoms. Okay, that's when those are two atoms. This is the nucleus here in red. And let's say those gray circles around it, basically the electron distribution. Now, at one point, as the atoms slightly get closer to each other, now electrons will repel each other. But if they get close to a certain degree where the electron density around each nucleus will be fluctuating, will be relocalized slightly to where this atom, the electrons will actually spend more time here, while this atom will spend more time here to make it very slightly positively charged and very slightly negatively charged. Then you would have a very weak attraction, extremely weak attraction. It's called van der Waals interaction. Very weak. Okay? Extremely important in protein biochemistry, extremely important in enzymes and 3D structures. So if you get those atoms closer, then all bets are off and you will have repulsion again. Okay? Then they're repulsive. So the distance is actually to the milli-angstrom, even less. Any slight fluctuation of that distance and the bond is gone. But yet it's a very important bond in the chemistry of the proteins. And that's called van der Waals interaction. Fluctuation and the electrons. The localization of the electrons around each atom to where you have a slight charging between the two atoms that will give you this slight attraction. Okay? Those are the bonds. Here you can see actually van der Waals bonds in action. DNA, for example, the DNA has the nitrogenous bases in the middle of that helix, right? Two strands that are intertwined. Now, the bases, the ones that actually carry the information of life, those are stacked on top of each other and they are bonded by van der Waals interaction. Without this interaction, the DNA will not remain stable as a helix, and hence it will unravel, and hence, of course, it will be degraded. And of course, life as we know it will cease. But it's very important. All right. So, since we're talking about biochemistry, of course, most of the action, actually all the action in biochemistry, all the reaction, happen in aqueous environment, in water, in the cytoplasm. There are some that happen in the membrane, in a hydrophobic environment, but actually the overwhelming majority happens within the cytoplasm. And water, of course, is the medium for this. And so water, as also you might remember, is an extremely marvelous molecule because it has polarity. The molecules organize themselves in a lattice that has a tension, cohesiveness, that will actually allow things happen. Also, they can dissolve everything. As a matter of fact, life, as we know it, also happens because of that interaction, at least in one aspect, interaction between water molecules and molecules that don't like water. We call them hydrophobic molecules. They're water-hating, hydrophobic molecules. On the other hand, if we have a water-loving molecule, they're hydrophilic. Those tend to dissolve in water. Okay? So what happens here, that when you have a non-polar molecule, say an oil droplet, like here in yellow, you'll see that each droplet will be surrounded by water. It's energetically unfavorable. And what happens is eventually those two droplets will come together, trying to minimize the chaos around them, and then they will have less surface exposed to water. That's what hydrophobic molecules like to do. They get together in order to minimize their interaction with water. Sort of like herd of sheep. They try to get together, or penguins in the cold, and work together so they have way less interaction with the cold outside. And so they rotate. So now you can see here you have only those surfaces rather than this entire surface and this entire surface exposed to water. This is called hydrophobic effect. It's not exactly a bond, it's an effect, but it's a very strong effect because those will eventually not be separable. Okay? It's this extremely important feature that made compartmentalization possible, that made the definition of a cell possible, because the membrane of a cell is basically something like that. Hydrophobic droplets that come together and then they make this compartment, which is the cell, that will separate the outside from the inside. Even within the cell, eukaryotic cell, for example, they would have mitochondria, nucleus, ribosomes, or Golgi apparatus. Those are also made from non-polar molecules that even sub-compartmentalize things inside the cell. So it's a really important effect in life in general. All right, so with that, I really want to talk a little bit about phospholipids because we're going to revisit them again. Phospholipids basically are lipids that are main component of our membranes. And I just want to give a brief introduction to them because we'll talk about them later. But basically, they are made of a base molecule. In this case, you can see a glycerol. It could be a sphingosine as well, but this is glycerol. It has 3 carbon atoms. And on each one of those carbon atoms, there will be a long ester molecule, long fatty acid molecule. And so you will have this cartoonish representation of glycerol as this stick. And then you have fatty acid here, and phosphate here. That phosphate and the carbon number 3 can also be hooked up to other molecules. I don't want to know much details about it. I just want to introduce this molecule that makes the majority of our cells, or cell membranes rather. So what happens here, we usually draw phospholipids in this fashion, like a sphere, which represent the glycerol, and 2 strands that represent the fatty acids. Now, fatty acids, if you don't know fatty acids, basically they're very simple molecules. That can go forever, and then carboxylic acid. Okay? That negative charge here is very important. That's what actually hooks up to the glycerol here. Okay? So those can be very long. Okay? And because they are very long, they don't like water. And so those tend to get together to prevent water from, or to minimize interaction with water. So we'll see something like this. Okay? If you put some fatty acids in water, they will just be simply floating there until we have a critical concentration, and then they make something we call micelles. Or if we have that critical concentration, they can also tend to organize this way. You can see here that the hydrophilic, the head, the glycerol, will be facing water because it can interact with water, while the fatty acids, those strands, are in air. That's hydrophobic, that's fine. Or, if you mix them together, they tend to make micelles. And you can see here the micelles inside the core of this blob, this sphere, is all the hydrophobic fatty acids inside, shielded from water, while those spheres out there is the glycerol that can interact with water. This is very important. So again, imagine this can make eventually what we call a cell. Okay? And that's why, by the way, fatty acids are used as surfactants, like in the soap, because they can dissolve fats or fatty molecules. When, for example, you eat something fatty, you use the soap. The soap have these long, which is sodium phosphate, that have this long chains that can engulf the fat in your hands as you wash your hands, and hence make it soluble in water. And that's why it's surfactant. It's very important actually for us inside our guts when we eat fatty food too, because we have the bile salts, which are something similar to that, that will solubilize fat in order for us to be able to digest it and absorb it. Okay. Here, for example, is a cell. You can envision that this membrane can go all the way around. And you can see here now we have something we call lipid bilayer. Okay? We have one layer of fatty acid and another layer of fatty acid. And if you look at this ingenious design, you'll see that both the polar groups, the glycerol, for example, are facing either the outside or the cytoplasmic inside, which are hydrophilic environment, which is like water. While inside here is all the hydrophobicity, all the fatty molecules, the fatty chains are shielded from water. So if anything were to cross from the outside to the inside of the cell, it has to go through this. And for that, we have special proteins. We are going to talk about some of those proteins actually that allow, they're called transporters. They allow transporting stuff from inside to the outside or outside to the inside. This here is a very interesting structure. It's called liposome. It's also a lipid bilayer. It can be artificially made, and it's a subject for intense research for delivery of medicine, medications. So they can actually make them and put medications in them, and then you can take them, and depending on the composition of the fatty acids, they tend to actually go to a different tissue type, liver, kidney, etc. So that will actually minimize the amount of medication that we need to take, and will target the liver to whatever tissue you want. But those can be very well organized carriers that can be made artificially. Okay, so those basically are the forces that I wanted to cover between, of course, the strong ones, the covalent bond, and the weak ones. Okay? There really, you'll see many examples. Actually, the entire semester is examples of these forces in extreme interaction. Okay? So everything that I'm going to talk about in this semester, in any life sciences, will be based on those forces coordinating together. And it's really, this is why it's an extremely, extremely important thing just to be aware of. All right, if you look at the DNA, we have three types of those forces that make DNA possible. Okay? So, if you look at this first thing, we have the two strands of DNA. If you're familiar with DNA, it's basically two strands that have bases. I'm going to cover it very briefly in the foreseeable future. So you have the bases, the complementary bases, hydrogen bonding to each other. As a matter of fact, this is the very essence of the DNA information. Without these pairings, we'll never have proteins made, and hence we'll never have life. So those hydrogen bonds really would make this possible. All right? Also, the backbone itself is phosphodiester bonds. That's the covalent bond that is the basis of the DNA. That is the basic strong structure of the DNA. And then the base static we mentioned is the hydrogen or the van der Waals bonding between them. That makes the DNA stable as well. So you can see that example. RNA. Right? We have three major types of RNA. This is one of them. This is called ribosomal RNA. It's part of the ribosome. The ribosome is this organelle inside the cell that is important for translating proteins, for making proteins. Now, it's a single-stranded nucleotide, but it has to fold in this seemingly very random way. And the folding here is held together by hydrogen bonding, by weak bonds. If this folding is not achieved, the ribosome itself will not be possible to translate, and you will not have protein. So you can see now that just a hydrogen bond, any hydrogen bond, that will make this odd structure possible to translate proteins. Okay? All right, transfer RNA. That's the RNA that brings amino acid to the ribosome to build the protein. Okay? It has to look like this cloverleaf structure. It has to look like this. And you can see here these are hydrogen bonds by complementary bases. If it doesn't fold this way, enzymes will not recognize it, it will not carry the amino acid, you will again not have a protein translated. So hydrogen bonding can see a weak bond, but yet it's responsible for life as we know it. Right? Messenger RNA, well, messenger RNA usually is just this strand that usually is fed through a ribosome in order to do the translation. All right, let's have our first clicker question. Which of the following are the strongest bonds in a molecule? All right. Here's another clicker question. Here, I opened the question. Next clicker question. What happens to nonpolar molecules in water? What happens to nonpolar molecules in water? Of course, the questions will increase. Yeah. All right, then let's go to the next part we're going to talk about today. Thermodynamics. Thermodynamics. Thermodynamics is really, might not be the favorite subject of everybody, including myself, but I just want to have a very brief introduction also to bioinformatics, thermodynamics, and related to biological systems. Okay, so there is nothing much really to necessarily memorize. The two laws of biochemistry, the thermodynamics, and of course some definitions. So of course we have something called system and boundaries in thermodynamics, and usually there is between the system and the universe around it, there is exchange in energy in different forms, right? Between heat, entropies, and randomness, right? So, and of course, biological systems, we're talking about different kind of things. For example, an enzyme that's doing a reaction, that's a system, whereas everything around it will be the universe around it, and there will be exchange between those two things. Okay? So any matters that confine in any kind of boundary, whether it's enzyme, whether it's a membrane, that reaction is taking place there, which is transportation between different compartments, our system. Okay? So the first law, which is really very famous law, is that energy is constant in the universe. Yeah, we cannot make it, we cannot destroy it. It simply converts from one form to another. All right? Now, these are the different forms of energy. We have kinetic energy, movement. We have heat, and we have potential energy, energy that is stored in order to do something later, whether it's a chemical reaction or another kinetic movement. All right? The energy related to the possibility of different molecules to react with one another. That's all we care about in the biology and life sciences. And basically, you're breaking bonds, you're making bonds. Now, are there any kinetic movements in biology? Of course. Of course, the muscles contractions, that's kinetic movement. That's a lot of energy that goes into it. Incredible amount of energy that goes in it, and incredible coordination between different things. We actually might not cover the muscle contractions, but we'll cover different things, and we'll see examples actually in the movie how things can be moving around the cell. All right? So usually, though, we either break a bond, release it as heat, produce heat for the environment, and we can store that breaking of that bond as a potential to do another reaction. And we'll see many examples of that, especially in glycolysis and fatty acid metabolism. We tend to actually extract energy from those bonds. Those energies are then stored in another kind of form, chemical energy, which you might know as ATP. ATP is another storage of energy. So basically, at least as far as this class is concerned, we're going to deal with that as far as breaking bonds and making bonds and storing energy somehow. Now, in the second law, that talks about chaos and entropy. And basically here, we are talking about that chaos or the randomness in the universe is always increasing, The result of any reaction, any biological event, any actually event altogether, but in biochemistry and biological event, we will have an increase in the overall randomness, okay, rather than decrease. Okay? Now, I really don't care about those equations, but that basically tell you the entropy, the total entropy is the total entropy of the system that's doing the reaction and the surroundings, and eventually we're going to link it to something called the free energy or delta G. Now, how we derive this is not important. Do you have to memorize this equation? No, you don't have to memorize this equation. However, you have to be familiar with delta G. Delta G is what we are going to use superficially in this course in order to evaluate whether the reaction can occur spontaneously or not. Spontaneously, as in it's going to need energy or it's not going to need energy. If delta G is negative, then it will not need an energy. If it's positive, then it will need an energy. The reaction cannot occur spontaneously by itself. If delta G is 0, then we are at equilibrium. Okay? Those are the three states of delta G. Positive, negative, or equals to 0. Okay. Now, why would the chaos or the randomness in the universe increases after a reaction? And is that possible altogether? So if you look at, for example, our old stuff we just talked about, old by now, which is the two droplets of oil, for example, coming together. The randomness, even though the two molecules here coming together, they are reducing the randomness and the chaos as far as they're concerned, because they're reducing the exposure to water. But if you look at the water molecules here, they were organized individually around each one of those non-polar molecules. Now, when they got together, there's less surface, and now we have more random molecules floating around. So the overall randomness of that entire system here has increased. We had less water molecules that organized around fatty acids, and more water molecules that are dispersed just because we reduced the contact with water molecules. Same thing here. If we take two single-stranded DNA that complement each other, they are actually very random. And because of that randomness, they have water molecules around them. Now, usually when you mix single-stranded DNA that are complementary to each other, mix them together, what's going to happen, they eventually will find the complement and they will form double-stranded DNA, as you can see here. Now that reaction that happens, which is basically complementing each other with hydrogen bonds, weak bonds, will actually allow the water molecules around them that each had a spot as a single DNA, single-strand DNA. Now they have no spots to attach to, so it will increase the randomness of the water or the system around. Okay? So randomness, in general, will increase after every reaction. Even though it appears that within that same system, that particular system, the randomness is decreasing, or the energy is decreasing, but around it, the randomness is increasing. And that is a second law of thermodynamics. The universe is a constant increase in randomness. All right. All right, here's another example. A protein going from denatured structure to its folded 3D structure. This is something we're going to cover actually at the very beginning. So you can see here how this strand is open. And within this openness, this strandedness, there is of course water molecules attached and they're happy. Now, as it goes from here to here, basically it's folding into this functional shape that we'll talk about later. Water molecules are squeezed out. The same thing. Water molecules squeezed out. They are now more random around the protein. While the protein itself has a minimum free energy, actually it's less random than here, but around it, the water molecules are more random. All right, so as far as thermodynamics is concerned. Delta G, you need to be aware of, and the fact that everything increases in randomness. Now, let's see if we can answer this question. Okay. Now, let's go to another review, and that's acid-base. Actually, most of the reactions in life are based on acid-base. And here, we're going to need to know certain things. First of all, this is called the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. That's the equation that relates the pH to the pKa of the molecule. And then, of course, whether something is protonated and not protonated. We're going to need to know certain rules. Again, I'm not going to ask you about the equation, but just as a review, of course, when we have buffer, and everything in biochemistry has a buffer. Everything has a buffer, because otherwise the proteins will die. You will see here in a buffer, what's the definition of a buffer basically? It will hold the pH of the environment, of the system, as stable as humanly possible before it will drop altogether, or before it raises, depending on if there is an acid or attack. So you can see here, for example, if you have a base, you are really maintaining the pH between 4 and 5 here, but then it will rapidly increase after you lose buffering capacity. Of course, the buffer usually buffers best at plus or minus 1 from its pKa value, right? And so you can see here that every buffer has its range, and actually in biology, everything happens in buffer. The cell is protected by a buffer, because if that doesn't exist, then you will lose the proteins. And by losing the proteins, I mean they will unfold and they will become very random and they will not be functional. And so that's why we have something we call buffer. And for that, we really have to engage in amino acids and what those amino acids pKa means. Okay? So this is why I want you to know a little bit, or review a little bit in your head, what's the Henderson-Hasselbalch and what does it do. About that, of course, when we talk about in the action center. Now, what is an amino acid? We're going to now launch into actual biology, and we are going to start talking about proteins. General concepts about proteins, the 20 amino acids, and this is where we're going to start actually memorizing structures. Now, remember the questions that are asked in the exams and the quizzes are multiple choice. In other words, I'm not going to expect you to draw the amino acid structure, but I expect you to recognize it when you have a list of them in the page. Okay? But what do we need to know about amino acids other than the 20 amino acids that we'll actually tackle today? Amino acids has two groups, amino group and a carboxylic acid group. Now here, of course, I am assuming that we have basic knowledge about organic chemistry to know what's a carboxylic group and what is an amino group. So it's an amino acid because it has an amino group and a carboxylic group. Those are called alpha carboxylic group and alpha amino group. And then, of course, we have the R, and that R can be one of 20 things that we will cover today. One of 20 things that we'll cover today that we memorize. And those 20 things will give the amino acid its physical and chemical characteristics, and hence it will give the protein its overall characteristic. First of all, let's talk about something we might have covered as well. It's called how do amino acids join together to make the protein. Okay? So we have usually amino acid number 1 and amino acid number 2 together, pointing this way to where you have the carboxyl group to the amino group, and then you will have a condensation reaction happen where you have 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. The 2 hydrogens from the amino group of amino acid number 2, and the oxygen comes from the carboxyl group of amino acid number 1, and you take them out, you have water out, and you have what we call a peptide bond. Okay, a peptide bond. That peptide bond, then this amino acid number 2 can go with amino acid number 3, and you will have the same event, and you have peptide bonds. And hence you can have a peptide or a protein. A protein basically is polypeptide that has many peptides, amino acids that are bonded together with this bond. Anything, by the way, in nature that breaks those peptide bonds, there are enzymes that break those, we call them peptidases, because they break peptide bonds. They hydrate them, they add the water back, and you have two amino acids, individual amino acids. Okay, so those, because now they lost their hydrogen and oxygen, we call them amino acid residues. Amino acid. Okay, so this is a peptide bond between amino acid number 1 and amino acid number 2. Now, if you notice that if we maintain this counting from 1 to 2 this way, we will always have something called an amino terminal. And on the other side, we will always have, at the very end, no matter how many amino acids we have, we're going to have something called carboxyl terminal. Okay? So a protein always have an N and a C terminal, or an amino terminal and carboxyl terminal. So it's a polar, it's a directional. The sequence is directional. When I give you a sequence of an amino acid, alanine, glycine, tyrosine, you will always assume that the first amino acid is the N-terminal amino acid, and the very last amino acid in that text will be the one that has the carboxyl terminal. That's very important. Because the way they're synthesized also is from N to C. We call them N-terminal and C-terminal, from N to C. All right, this is the N-terminal, and this is the C-terminal. Okay, now let's look at it in a different diagram. You can see here those rectangles are basically the peptide bonds. Those peptide bonds, by the way, are rigid. The C and the N around it, you cannot twist them. They're very rigid, they're planar. But around them, those are very, very flexible. You can rotate the amino acid around the other amino acid very easily. Not at the peptide bond, around the peptide bond. And those two angles are called phi angle and psi angle. They are extremely pivotal. They are very pivotal because the entire 3D structure of the protein will hinge on how those amino acid residues rotate around each other to make these very elaborate structures. Very, very elaborate structures. As a matter of fact, without these elaborate structures that are maintained, by the way, by weak bonds, hydrogen bonds and van der Waals, etc., the protein will not be functional, even though the sequence is correct. But if it's not folded in the right fold, it's not functional. All right, another thing that we'll cover in the 20 amino acids, we are going to cover the L amino acid. Okay, now again, I'm relying on your knowledge in organic chemistry, that usually we have isomers. You know, we have a chiral atom in the middle that the atoms around it can be arranged either as an L isomer or as a D isomer. Okay, before dextro. Now, we are using in life, I don't know why, but in life usually L amino acids are used. All our proteins are made from L amino acids. Nothing is made from D amino acids. Even though the D amino acid life is possible. As a matter of fact, they did these experiments some time back, and they tried to make proteins that are mirror images of our proteins, and they were functional. They were functional and they were fine. And we don't know why somehow L was chosen over D. The only thing we can think of is that somehow D amino acids tend to crystallize out of solution faster, maybe slightly faster. And maybe life started as L and D, and somehow D got screwed up because they crystallized out of the environment, and L continued. But we don't know, it's just guessing. So we're talking about, when we talk about amino acids, we talk about L amino acids. All right. Alrighty, covered this. Here again, the directionality of an amino acid. You can see here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 5 amino acids, tyrosine, glycine, glycine, and leucine. And you can see we're going from N-terminal to the C-terminal, from the amino terminal to the carboxyl terminal. This is very, very important, by the way. And if you look here carefully, let's look here at, let's take an amino acid like this, glycine. Okay, the R group of glycine is H. Now look at here. If you look at the glycine, it has a right side and a left side. On its left side is this big amino acid tyrosine. On its right side is glycine. Okay? Instead of saying left side and right side, we actually say on the carboxyl side it has glycine, and its amino side it has tyrosine. This is very important because if I break this amino acid on the carboxy side of glycine, then I'm going to have those 3 amino acids and these 2 amino acids. But if I break it on the amino side, then I'm going to have only tyrosine and those others. This is extremely important. Why? Because peptidases that we will talk about very briefly in the future, they actually know the difference between the carboxyl side and the amino side, and they break at a very specific sequence. All right, any questions so far, by the way? Please feel free to interrupt me. Okay? I'll kick you out of the class, but feel free to interrupt me. If I don't answer you immediately, by the way, this is because I'm trying to finish your thought. But once I finish my sentence, please, don't hesitate. Interrupt me at any time if you have any questions. All right. Now, here are some very nice apps. This is actually a website. You can go there and you can quiz yourself about amino acids. That will help you to maybe memorize them as we go through them. And there's also an AA tutor. I don't know if that still exists, but it exists for, those smartphones and small devices. So you can also, in your do this kind of stuff. Okay, what is a peptide bond? It's formed by what? Let's answer this question. All right, so here are our 20 amino acids. Okay, so again, I don't really care about how you draw it, but I need you to recognize it in the exam. I need you to recognize it in the metabolic pathways that we're going to have. You need to recognize those structures in order to answer the questions. All right, the 20 amino acids, and they're really progressive if you think about them. The R group is really what's the difference, and so they're really they're reasonable. They're not like these intrusive kind of things where you have to memorize ridiculous kind of stuff. It's just very simple, I think. All right, so let's organize them. That will help us memorize them better if we understand them, if we understand their chemical and physical properties. All right. So this group here, this is one way to organize those amino acids. This group is called neutral nonpolar. Now, when I talk about these physical properties, I'm talking about the R group. I'm not talking about the alpha or the amino or the carboxyl group. I'm talking about the R group itself. So based on the R group, we have neutral, nonpolar, and possibly hydrophobic groups. Neutral because they don't have any charge. Okay? They're not charged under any circumstances. Nonpolar, there is no partial charge in them. There is no polarity. And they are mostly hydrophobic. In other words, when we say hydrophobic, we don't mean like extremely phobic of water, but they prefer to be outside of the water. They like to be buried inside the protein when we talk about the structures. All right, and here are those amino acids. Now, in addition to the structures that we need to memorize, we need to, of course, be familiar with the 1-letter and the 3-letter code. Okay? So, those are the amino acids: glycine, alanine, leucine, isoleucine, valine, proline, tryptophan, phenylalanine, and methionine. Okay? Those amino acids, if you look here, you will find that, and we'll zoom to them later, but you will find that there is the simplest one, which our group stands for H. That's a very simple amino acid. And then we have these more elaborate ones with actual aromatic groups and stuff like that. But they all basically are neutral. They don't have a charge. They prefer not to interact with water. Now, those are also neutral, but they're polar. They don't have a charge, but they're polar, and they do like to interact with water. And so, usually, they are found on the surface of the protein. On the surface of the protein, interacting with the environment, solubilizing the protein, for example, interacting with other substrates at the beginning. And those are serine, threonine, tyrosine, asparagine, glutamine, and cysteine. You can see here, for example, the R group are the ones on the top, right? So you have your alpha amino group and your alpha carboxyl group, and all of them, they're laid the same way. And then the R group starts from here. And here is serine. It has an OH. It's an alcohol. right? It's an alcohol for a group. Let's see here, for example, tyrosine. You have this aromatic group. This is asparagine. You have this carboxyamide group. Yeah? Those are not charged, but they can interact with water because there's some polarity, there's partial charges, and hence they can interact with water. Okay? Let's see, what else? We have acidic amino acids, and those are acidic in nature. So the R group is acidic. In other words, organic chemistry-wise, they have carboxylic group for an R group. And here you can see the carboxylic group. And look at the difference between aspartate and glutamate, or aspartic acid and glutamic acid. The difference is just one extra middle group. Just one extra middle group. So those are very easy. As a matter of fact, the acidic amino acids are part of 5 amino acids that are the sole contributor to the overall charge of the protein, the surface of the protein, because they're all always charged under physiological pH. I repeat, under physiological pH. So if there are acidic acids, there must be basic amino acids, and those are the other 3 of those 5. Those are lysine, arginine, and histidine. Those are positively charged. Those are basic amino acids. You can see the R groups as well. Okay? Those are our 20 amino acids that we need.